I'm standing in front of a map that shows all the states involved in the Civil War. You've got Georgia down here, and your Virginia up here, and even Pennsylvania, where the Battle of Gettysburg took place. But those weren't the only states involved. Look up here at this tiny map. That's Minnesota, and I'm about to fire so much Minnesota Civil War history at your face, Rand McNally is gonna have to make a whole new map. Welcome to Minnesota Historia. I'm Haley, your guide to Minnesota in the Civil War. The Civil War came at a really awkward time for Minnesota. We literally had just become a state on May 11th, 1858. And then, 2 years and 7 months later, South Carolina secedes from the Union. Imagine arriving at a party and half the guests immediately leave. Was it something I said? Did I mention I brought enough tater tot hot dish to share? Alabama? Mississippi? It's no wonder Minnesota fell all over itself offering the very first soldiers to the Union Army. If you're wondering how did that even happen, don't worry, we've got Civil War reenactor Jason Grimm here to explain everything.
And it just so happened to be that our governor was in Washington, D.C. when Fort Sumter was fired upon, and that time you could practically walk into the White House without an appointment. So they walked into the Secretary of War's office and said, I'm going to commit 1,000 men to the defense of this nation.
Officially, that made the 1st Minnesota Infantry Regiment the first.
Imagine then having to wire back to the state saying, hey, I just committed 1,000 men. Can you start the recruitment efforts back home?
This was not a problem for the Minnesota 1st. Volunteers lined up and signed up here at Fort Snelling.
Company, ready!
Oh look, we've got archival video of the enlistment from 1861. I hope you did not believe me. This footage is actually from 1993, but look at how old it looks. This wasn't even Fort Snelling's first brush with Civil War history. 30 years earlier, in the 1830s, the Army thought that it was okay for soldiers to bring people that they'd enslaved with them to the fort, including Dred Scott and Harriet Robinson Scott, who couldn't help but notice that Minnesota, the very place that they were living, was a free territory. The Scots sued for their freedom, and the Supreme Court, in its infinite wisdom, sided with slavery. What is it with this court? This decision enraged half the country and led pretty directly to the Civil War and the aforementioned 1st Minnesota Infantry Regiment. In addition to having the first volunteer soldiers, Minnesota also had the last.
Here we are commemorating the death of the last member of the Grand Army of the Republic, Albert Woolson.
To be clear, this didn't just happen. Albert Woolson died on August 2nd, 1956, at the age of 106. He was the last surviving Civil War veteran, so people are still making a big deal out of it, including his ancestors, some of his fans, and the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. Yes, he's on his cell phone, but he's also 100% here for Albert Woolson.
He was the last Civil War veteran from either side, North or South, to pass away.
I was also sorry to hear about your passing, Mr. President.
Well, thank you. Yes, it was a real headache for me.
In 1864, Albert Woolson enlisted as a drummer boy in a heavy artillery regiment. Garrisoned in Chattanooga, Tennessee, his regiment saw no actual combat. But that didn't stop these Civil War reenactors from showing up at this memorial service and firing a cannonball into some trees.
The cannon that's behind me is a little cannon. That's called light artillery. So what Albert Woolson was used to seeing is much bigger, far bigger cannons.
Are we safe to stand here while they're shooting, or do we need to be back further?
We should be.
Yeah.
After serving for almost a year, Albert Woolson was discharged and returned to Minnesota, where he found work as a musician, a mechanical engineer, a teacher, and singing in a minstrel show where he wore blackface. Why does history always have to be so messy?
It is. All of our past is a complicated story.
Woolson spent the second half of his crazy long life in Duth, Minnesota, where they still celebrate him today, and not just at his gravesite. At the St. Louis County Depot, you can read all about him in Veterans Memorial Hall, and there's a big old statue of him out front. Some people say if you sit on Albert Woolson's lap while singing Battle Hymn of the Republic, you can make a wish. Just make it something that could reasonably be accomplished by the Grand Army of the Republic, like laying waste to Atlanta.
All right, cool.
I've got time for 2 more stories. One that I hate and one that I love. If you look up where is the nearest Civil War battlefield to me, oh hi, by the way, I'm in Minnesota, you might be surprised to see sites right here in our own state. You don't have to go to Illinois or Missouri to get your battlefield on, because Minnesota started a whole other civil war right here in its own backyard. About a decade before the Civil War started, Minnesota's territorial governor, Alexander Ramsey, began a systematic campaign to get rid of every Dakota still living in the territory. If that sounds like the classic definition of a genocide to you, I would not argue that point. First, Ramsey pushed the Dakota onto a tiny reservation along the Minnesota River. Then, he withheld promised payments and food rations to starve them to death. You will not be shocked to learn that the Dakota fought back. Tensions boiled over in Acton, Minnesota, where a Dakota hunting party killed 5 people. After that, the Dakota tried to target people who'd wronged them. That distinction was not always clear to anybody. Ramsey saw the attacks as an opportunity, telling the state legislature that the Dakota, quote, must be exterminated or driven forever beyond the borders of the state. So Minnesota did both. The war lasted just 6 weeks, after which a military commission hanged 38 Dakota, the largest mass execution in American history, right here in downtown Mankato. Oh, and guess who was there that day? Young Albert Woolson. He was just 13 years old. Maybe his parents brought him? The Dakota genocide is arguably the worst thing Minnesota has ever done. Obviously, that was the story I hate. But there is one last Civil War story that I kinda love. Remember the 1st Minnesota Infantry Regiment? Well, they fought at the Battle of Gettysburg in July of 1863. They fought in all the famous battles.
The 1st Minnesota, again, finds itself right in the heaviest of fighting. And the 28th Virginia was one of the Confederate regiments that charged across an open field, mile-long charge over open, just taking shots from cannons. And the 1st Minnesota is able to grab the 28th Virginia flag and capture it.
Yeah, General Hancock pointed at the line of Confederates and said to the colonel, "Colonel, do you see those colors? Then take them."
Thank you, sir.
And they did.
Job well done.
Look, armies used to care a lot more about winning flags. Flags were used to guide soldiers and show progress. Of course, we've moved beyond caring about trivial things like flags.
Of course, the state of Virginia would like it back.
What do you mean Virginia wants its flag back? Like, today? In 1905, Congress demanded that all battle flags be returned to their states of origin. Minnesota hilariously pretended the flag was lost.
Rumor has it is that the flag of the 28th Virginia was never inventoried in the federal system, so that's why the state of Minnesota can hold on to it.
Then Virginia started using words like heritage and tradition. They asked for it in 1961, 1998, 2000, 2003, 2013, probably last week, and maybe tomorrow at noon. They tried to sue Minnesota. Then they tried to request it real casually through an inter-museum loan. Minnesota refused every time. Nice try, Virginia. My favorite rejection came from former governor and current action figure, Jesse Ventura, who said at various times, "Why? I mean, we won." And also, "We took it. That makes it our heritage." But what do Civil War reenactors think about this?
Don't give it up. Keep it. Yeah, it was captured, during an engagement and should be. It's where it should be.
Keep it in Minnesota. That's my personal feeling.
Yeah, we won them fair.
It shouldn't be a brag. There's nothing to brag about. There was a lot of loss of life around that flag. But at the same time, that brotherhood of those Union veterans that came back, that survived that battle, I think having that in place as a memory of their sacrifices and what that costs to bring this country back together, I think it can stay here.
Today, the flag is cared for by the Minnesota Historical Society, where they keep it safe, deep inside their fortress-like building. Thanks for watching Minnesota Historia, your guide to all things quirky in Minnesota history. In future episodes, we'll be going even further and deeper into the quirky, soft underbelly of this very weird state. Yup. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And please become a member of PBS North to support projects just like this.